Hi, and welcome to MP Student, where we're keeping you updated with every aspect of your life in and out of school. I am Dr. Patrice Little, founder of MP Student, and today we are talking 5 ways to prescribe safely for NP students. And joining us today is community pharmacist, Dr. Emmanuel Imonigie. Welcome, Dr. Emmanuel. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Dr. Little.
Well, let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about your background as a pharmacist and how you got into being a community pharmacist.
Thank you. Yeah, so many pharmacists and people who went through pharmacy school will tell you a lot of them didn't originally plan on going to pharmacy school. And so I originally planned on going to med school. And then as I started doing more research into like dentistry or pharmacy or med school, I ended up deciding to go to pharmacy school. I realized there's a lot of different cool things you could do as a pharmacist that a lot of people didn't know about. And so I ended up choosing to do that instead. But yeah, so my background right now is based in community pharmacy. I'm hoping to expand that in years to come. But community pharmacy is what I do now.
And I understand in that role you work closely with nurse practitioners, which is why we're featuring you today.
Yeah, I'm actually, seems like the connection broke up for a second, so I didn't hear the last thing you said. Um,
Oh, okay. I was going to say, and I understand that you work closely with nurse practitioners, which is why we have you on today.
Yeah, that is correct. So the community pharmacy I work in, they have a clinic attached, and so we work hand in hand with providers. Some of them PAs, many of them nurse practitioners, and so we work hand in hand with them, bounce ideas off each other. So it's a pretty neat interprofessional environment that I work in.
And I've had the opportunity to work in that role before, and I've learned a lot from the pharmacists. But let's talk about as far as what the pharmacists have like seen as far as the interaction with nurse practitioners. What have you noticed? Because the whole purpose is to make sure that people gain some insight on how to function better as an NP student and NP. What have you noticed as far as with nurse practitioner practice? Things that they could do to enhance what they're already doing when it comes to prescribing?
That's a great question. I've definitely noticed a lot of different things. I would say one thing I've noticed with NPs is the personability that they have. I enjoy the energy that they have versus when I'm around different providers. And I also notice patients enjoy that too, the accessibility that they have. But particularly when it comes to prescribing, I wrote down a couple different things that I'll probably present about at a later date. But one big thing that I think will help a lot of NPs is literature. I think even many physicians, they usually rely on guidelines and clinical protocols. And many NPs, especially the place I work, they rely on those clinical guidelines. But I think taking things a step further, which obviously requires more work, would be to read some of the literature. So, for example, if you look at like a guideline that talks about like hypertension, for example, underneath the guideline, even if it's a health system protocol, there will be some literature that they cite. And most people don't go and deep dive into that literature, but doing that really enhances your knowledge when it comes to the things that you want to prescribe and answering questions that patients may have.
You're absolutely right, 'cause, even when it comes to, doing research or when you're writing an article, they always say, "Look at the references to that article that you're citing," because sometimes you find additional references, and you also have a more understanding of what the original the contents that the original authors had used. And guess what? I am one of those nurse practitioners where I've and never look as far as those guidelines, look into the additional authorship that and the reference for those guidelines. I usually just look at the guidelines. So that's I like that you had point that out. So with that being said, I wanted to just highlight how that you are our premier pharmacist here at NP Student. You serve as one of our advisors, and we're just so excited to have you as part of the team where we can get wisdom and insights to have better practice. And the reason why I emphasize that is because this platform is really about the cultivating of the new generation of nurse practitioners. And so
Right.
that's why we target the students. What are some additional things that students could do from the time while they're in school that could prepare them to be better prescribers in practice?
Love the question. Obviously, bouncing off what I already talked about, the literature, you're gonna have a lot of opportunities to see literature while you're training.
Okay.
But honestly, just on top of that, the literature and the guidelines and asking questions from different providers, PAs, physicians, pharmacists, you name it builds confidence. Because one thing as a nurse practitioner, you are a very unique provider. So you're not a physician, you're not a nurse, you're this thing in the middle, and you have responsibility and the ability to prescribe. And so when you first come out, it can be scary to have that responsibility, right? And so really owning that while you're in school and using the literature, using colleagues, peers, mentors to build confidence while you're in school will make it so you can just take off running when you're done. But on top of that, there's a couple of different things I feel like on top of the clinical guidelines and the literature that you can use that'll help you while you're in school. And one thing I will say, so the world we live in now is changing. There's a lot of technology. At one point in time, you were going to write down scripts. That's everything was handwritten. Then you would hand them off. In the clinic and community pharmacy that I work in, there's like cell phones and computers you're going to use to e-prescribe. And so really getting familiar with technology as it continues to change will also help you because
Mhm.
chances are where you work, you're probably going to prescribe electronically to some degree, right? So getting really comfortable with technology, also getting really comfortable with the laws in your state. The laws in your jurisdiction, they really differ from state to state. And so getting really familiar with that on top of the technology as it changes gives you an edge when you graduate and you become a practicing NP.
I like that, being familiar with the laws, because one other thing is with the practice environment, it differs, like you said, from state to state.
Right.
And in many states, you have to have that collaborative agreement with the physician.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a big one. Yeah, and I remember when I was in school, I didn't have anything cool like NP student to kind of give me the rundown. And so I noticed a lot of different colleagues of mine and peers of mine in school. A lot of us didn't really understand what we were doing. Like you're obviously getting this training, there's a heavy study load, but like the confidence, like the aura of being a provider, like capturing that early is a huge cheat code. So I think owning that early, like taking the ownership of that, like you are worthy, is
Mhm.
huge. For me, what helped with that was people in my personal life and patients recognizing that in me while I was in school, and then it allowed me to own that. And that's going to be one of the biggest parts I feel like isn't always talked about. Is really just believing in what you are while you're in school and training.
Absolutely, absolutely. It sounds like that you had some great mentors.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So let's change gears a little bit, because the thing why I'm smiling and I can't stop smiling is because you are teaching the What's in a Script course this Thursday on the MP Student Bootcamp platform. And for those who are just tuning in now, MP Student is our intensive that we have every year. And this year it's the 2.0 version because you get to get your 4 contact hours. And we actually have Dr. Emmanuel bringing his wisdom to the table. And so, can you talk a little bit about what you'll be talking or highlight what you'll be mentioning in that course? What's in the script?
Absolutely. I will do that. It'll be a pleasure. Some of those things we've already talked about. And in the presentation, I will be talking more in
We have some technical
about some of the
difficulties. Okay. Is it okay for
about.
you to revisit that? Because it went out for a second. So while Dr.
Okay.
Emmanuel is getting his sound back, I just wanted just to highlight a little bit about the what's in the script as far as the objectives that will be covered. So what's in the script, early prescribing practices for NP student. And in this course, we're going to focus on the significance of practice guidelines to treat common acute conditions in family practice, discuss parts of a prescription for new prescribers, and examine common prescribing errors and discuss strategies to develop good prescribing practices. Dr. Manuel, are you back?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
You
sure
can hear me?
can.
Can you
What I
see
was
me
doing,
still?
yep, we see you well. I was just highlighting the outcomes that the students would gain from attending this course. So just while we were able to resolve the technical difficulty.
Right. Yeah, sorry about that. If I cut off at any time, I'm probably still having the issues, but as long as you guys can see me and hear me, that's fine. The objectives that we'll discuss the significance of guidelines in treating common acute conditions in the family practice setting, like you've already said. We'll kind of describe different components of the script. We'll kind of look at some common errors that are made in the prescribing process. And additionally, we'll talk about practice guidelines, different kinds, different protocols, a little bit about literature, like we've already discussed. We'll talk about e-prescribing, the technologies as they change. Even on the pharmacy side, there's some systems in place that pharmacists can use to catch errors if there are errors on the NP side. We'll talk a little bit about the different laws, like controlled substances versus non-controlled substances. And then we'll also talk about some statistics from the FDA about patients not taking prescriptions as guided, and the different numbers that the FDA, I was able to pull from the FDA. We'll also talk about discontinuing therapy and just knowing when to discontinue therapy, and looking at patients who are taking medications they don't need to take anymore. And then the last thing that we'll talk about today, even though there's other things in the presentation, is just understanding the relationship you have with your patients and your patient population. I feel like that's an area that's not going to get enough attention, but I think really enhances your prescribing. But yeah, so hopefully you guys were able to hear all of that. My side, it's still a little bit frozen.
Yes, we actually were, and it sounds like that you have a great foundation that's set up for the students. This is something that Dr. Emmanuel and I took some time to just really put out there what we feel will equip students as they transition into MPs, but really just for them to get a great synopsis of what to expect in MP school and how to put those pieces together. Because oftentimes in MP school, which has been over 10 years for me since I graduated MP school, we're told to almost like memorize these facts about the pharmacokinetics and the actual prototype, but there's more to prescribing than just memorizing facts. It's really understanding how the body responds to the medications. And then you mentioned very well, Dr. Emmanuel, about discontinue when to discontinue the medications, because reconciliation is still a big issue. Some patients, they come to you and they've been on a medication for 10 years and you're like, why are you still why are you still taking it? How
Right.
does this happen? How was somebody still refilling it? Number one. So there's quite a bit, quite a few things, and it's all about prescribing safely. So with that in mind, you said quite a few things that would go under the 5 ways to prescribe safely. But it's can you sum it up for us before we get ready to go? Just what are 5 ways that NP students can prescribe safely?
Right. Yeah. And some of these things I already went over, but basically adhering to your company protocols and guidelines, as well as association guidelines like the American Heart Association. Staying close to that will kind of make sure you prescribe the right things, right? And then when it comes to how to prescribe, right? Also, alertness when prescribing and writing down scripts or typing them in from a drop down menu, very important. Also, state laws and understanding controlled versus non-controlled, right? That's going to differ depending on your jurisdiction. So being like having an understanding of the laws in your area is very important. Knowing when to discontinue therapy, like we just talked about, very important. There is systems on the pharmacy side designed to catch those things and ask patients, hey, are you still taking this? Should you still be taking this? Does your prescriber know? Right. And then last is, like I said, understanding your patient population. Things can differ depending on different demographics, patient demographics. And so I feel like having understanding of those things is very important. Obviously, this doesn't replace what you're going to learn in school. You're going to have a lot more intense training. This is just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect and what to own as you continue your training as a nurse practitioner.
Well said. I'm going to reinforce that as long with you. This does not replace what you learn in your rigorous program. This is once again to give you it's an in service intensive for you to really be able to put those pieces together early. Sometimes with school, it's building on it and then putting the pieces together, but it's giving you that overview very early. And what we're talking about is the MP student boot camp, the What's in the Script course that Dr. Emmanuel is facilitating this Thursday. You still can join. And even if you did not attend the first 3 weeks of the MP Student Bootcamp, it will be available on demand. Here's the QR code, or you can go to mpstudentbootcamp.com. And is there anything that you would like to add before we close? Anything you'd like to add, or as far as with the students before we go? Okay. So Dr. Emmanuel just sent me a message saying that his screen is frozen on the other end, even though we're able to see him. Hoping that you found this information very valuable. Thank you again for tuning in into MP Student, where our goal is to keep you updated with every aspect of your life in and out of school. I am Patrice Little, and we will see you next time.